Good evening and welcome to Battle of the Books. I am Michelle Jeske and I am the City Librarian and Executive Director of the Denver Public Library, and I'm so glad to be here with you tonight. Our mission at the Denver Public Library is together we create welcoming spaces where all are free to explore and connect. And we can create those welcoming spaces online as well as in our 27 library locations. So welcome tonight, and thank you so much for joining us. This event is part of Denver Public Library's Winter of Reading, an annual challenge designed to encourage adults to read more and explore the library's offerings. I'm excited about this evening's event. Special thanks to Jim and Margot Mustich and our 5 panelists for this evening's event tonight. I also want to take time to thank the bookies for being our online bookseller today. Look for a link in the chat to order any of the battle's featured titles. Finally, a special shout out to the DPL battle team for helping make tonight possible. Programs like these are only possible with a team of committed and talented staff members. This event is being recorded and will be available on the DPL YouTube channel in a few days. So if you have fun, tell your friends and family about it so they can enjoy it as well. All right, about tonight's event. Each of our panelists will have the opportunity to advocate for their book of choice, and Jim will share more details about the battle here in a minute. But first, a little bit about Jim himself. Jim began his career in bookselling at an independent bookstore in Briarcliff Manor, New York, in the early 1980s. In 1986, he co-founded the acclaimed book catalog, A Common Reader, and was for 2 decades its guiding force. He subsequently has worked as an editorial and product development executive in the publishing industry. His book, 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die, 14 years in the writing now, was published to great acclaim in October 2018. The Washington Post called it the ultimate literary bucket list, and the Oprah magazine, said, if there's a heaven just for readers, this is it. Jim lives with his wife, Margot, in Connecticut. Jim, good to see you again, and take it away.
Nice to see you, Michelle. Thank you very much. A warm welcome to all of you tuned in from my little book room here in Connecticut. And I'm thrilled to have the Battle of the Books be part of the Denver Public Library's Winter of Reading festivities for the 3rd year in a row. Even remotely, it's a great way to celebrate both the company of books and the company of readers. We'll be posting some information as we go in the chat. You can activate the chat at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we also encourage you to post any comments that you have as we go along. In our first battle with the Denver Public Library in January 2021, the event was kicked off with a message from Governor Polis, who told us why it can be restorative to lose oneself in an Agatha Christie mystery. The battle that night was won by attorney and food writer Adrian Miller, known far and wide as the soul food scholar, who made all of us hungry and won the most votes with his advocacy for The Taste of Southern Cooking by Edna Lewis. I think of that food connection now because I've always believed that we read the way we eat. Our yen may be for hot dogs one day and haute cuisine the next. We read for pleasure as well as nutrition, and sometimes just on a whim, just as we eat. Our reading nourishes the longest and most important conversation of our lives, the one we have with ourselves, inside our heads, morning, noon, and night, and which in turn informs and animates every conversation we have with another. One night, a long time ago now, I was reading aloud to our daughters from a novel for young readers called Fog Magic by Julia Sauer. As I was reading, the progress of the very exciting narrative was interrupted by a sentence that I stopped to read 3 times. Most of us live in 2 worlds, our real world and the one we build or spin for ourselves out of the books we read, the heroes we admire, the things we hope to do. Pondering that thought after the girls were tucked in, it struck me that in significant ways, our real world is less near the essence of our experience than the one we build or spin. Because the inner life, the one of wishes and memories, faiths and fears that fuels our days, provides the only true continuity we know throughout all the comings and goings circumstances demand. And that's why it's important to read good books. They nourish the vein of our spirit and teach us how to mine it. Tonight, we have a particularly enticing menu of books for you, courtesy of our 5 contestants. David Heska Wanby-Wyden, who was the runner-up in our last year's battle and is back determined to be triumphant tonight. Julie Riskin, Rory Potikin, Usma Zahanat Khan, and Connor McCormick Kavanaugh. I thank them all for being with us tonight. I'll be introducing each of them in more detail shortly to talk about the books they've chosen to champion. I'd like to second Michelle's thanks for the library's battle team. They're a pleasure to work with and wonderful collaborators. Let me take another minute to set the stage for the battle. I spent 14 years, as Michelle mentioned, writing this book, 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die, into which I packed 1,000 brief, but I hope inviting essays on books ranging from the works of Agatha Christie to those of Abraham Lincoln, from the Epic of Gilgamesh encoded on tablets in Babylon 4,000 years ago, to Life in Code, A Personal History of Technology by Ellen Ullman, which was published in 2017. When my book was published in 2018, I did dozens of events in libraries and bookstores talking about how I had made my list and composed the book. But the best part of those evenings were the conversations with the audience after my talk, which quickly made me realize that I was going to spend the next 14 years of my life hearing from readers what I'd gotten wrong, the books I'd left out, the authors I should have included. It was my wife, Margot, who had the wonderful idea to make such merry arguments about books and authors into their own events. Thus, the Battle of the Books was born, landing us in communities where local luminaries could share their own favorite books with us and their neighbors, and the audience could vote on who was most persuasive. Which brings us, virtually at least, to Denver tonight. So let's get to it. As I said, we have 5 contestants. I'll introduce them one by one, and then each will speak for 4 minutes about a book I left off my list, but that they think everybody should read. I will signal them when they have 30 seconds left and give them the hook when they hit the 4-minute mark. After all 5 have pitched their books, you'll cast your vote for who was most convincing. And I'll tell you how to do that when we get to that point in the program. You can purchase all of the books you hear about tonight, including my book, from the library's book-selling partner, The Bookies, formerly Book Bar. There's a link to a Battle of the Books page on their website in the chat. And you can, of course, borrow all of the books you'll be hearing about at the Denver Library, denverlibrary.org. Tonight's winner will receive a signed copy of my book, and the runner-up will be back with us next year to try again. And all of tonight's battlers will be receiving a Winter of Reading swag bag from DPL. So much for the windup. Now the pitches. Leading off tonight is David Heska Wanby-Wyden, an enrolled citizen of the Sicangu Lakota Nation, who is the author of Winter Counts, nominated for the Edgar Award and winner of the Anthony, the Thriller, the Lefty, Barry, McCavity, Spur, High Plains, and Tilly Olsen Awards. The novel was a New York Times Editor's Choice, an Indie Next Pick, main selection of the Book of the Month Club, and a Best Book of 2020, according to NPR, Amazon, Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, and other magazines. And me, by the way. His next novel, Wisdom Corner, will be released by HarperCollins in early 2024. And the book he's going to talk about tonight, and I can't wait to hear about this, is the American classic, The Postman Always Rings Twice by James N. Cain. David, take it away.
Well, thank you, Jim and Margot, and thank you, DPL, for inviting me back to this wonderful event. It is really my honor to be here again. I had a great time last year, and I was disappointed I didn't win, but I was so thrilled to talk about Winter in the Blood by James Welch. And so that was really a wonderful time. And let me thank DPL not only for sponsoring this event, but for continuing to support my book, Winter Counts. They've been a great supporter of the novel, and I just can't thank them enough. Yes, there is a sequel coming. I get at least 50 emails a week asking when it's coming, and it is now scheduled for early 2024. I'm sorry, it takes a long time to put a book out. But let me move on to my choice today, the classic mystery novel, The Postman Always Rings Twice by James M. Cain. This is not that book. This is a collection of his short stories, as I do not actually have a paper copy of it. I have it on ebook. I've had maybe 2 or 3 copies in my life, and I currently have it on ebook. But this is a wonderful collection of James M. Cain's short stories. Let me tell you a little bit about James M. Cain, who is one of the great writers in American history. James M. Cain was born in 1892 and he died in 1977. He served in the Army in World War I, and he requested combat duty, and indeed that was granted. He fought in France and barely survived a poison gas attack. Now, after the war, James M. Cain worked as a highly respected journalist before turning to literature. Now, over the course of Cain's career, he published nearly 24 novels and novellas and scores of short stories, and he also worked as a screenplay writer in Hollywood. Here are just a couple of the novels that he wrote. Double Indemnity in 1936, Mildred Pierce, 1941, and The Butterfly, 1947, in addition to his masterpiece, his debut novel, The Postman Always Rings Twice, 1934. Now, before I talk about that book, let me say that his novels, short stories, and screenplays have been adapted for over 30 films, including 3 of the greatest films of the 1940s and possibly of all time. Here are these films: Double Indemnity, Mildred Pierce, and The Postman Always Rings Twice. Double Indemnity, directed by Billy Wilder and starring Fred MacMurray and Barbara Stanwyck, is considered to be the greatest film noir film ever made. So he was doing something right there. So overall, James M. Cain is considered to be one of the top 5 crime writers ever. But he's not just, I would suggest to you, he's not just one of the greatest mystery writers, he is one of the great American authors. Now, unbelievably, not one of his novels is included in the 1,000 novels database, but we can change that today. Now, let me talk briefly about The Postman Always Rings Twice. Published in 1934, The Postman Always Rings Twice was an immediate success, but controversial for its time because of its inclusion of violence and sexuality. It's the story of Frank Chambers, a drifter who stops at a diner in California and ends up working there. He's immediately attracted to Cora, the wife of the owner, and they begin an affair. Frank and Cora decide to murder Cora's husband, Nick, so they can start a new life together. They do murder him, but things don't go exactly as planned, and they turn on each other. Now, I won't say anything more about the plot of the novel for those of you who haven't read it. I'll just note that it is a gritty and relentless novel that invented the subgenre of hard-boiled crime fiction. It's safe to say that mystery fiction would not exist in its current form if not for the novel. Now, if you need anything more, the book influenced many other important works of literature, including Albert Camus' The Stranger. Now, frankly, I've got 30 seconds. This is one of the most influential novels in world history. The book is included in the Modern Library's list of 100 best novels of all time, and it's been adapted for film 7 times in 5 countries, as an opera, also as an opera, a radio drama, and a play. It's universally lauded by the critics as an American classic. But The Postman Always Rings Twice is much more than a highly influential novel. It's a great read with unforgettable characters and a shocking plot far ahead of its time.
Thank you, David, for that passionate advocacy for The Postman Always Rings Twice. As David mentioned, his next novel will be out next year called Wisdom Corner, which gives all of you who have not yet read Winter Counts, his first wonderful novel, a chance to read it. Thank you, David. Our second participant tonight is Julie Riskin. Julie is fortunate to serve as the co-executive director of the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition, a statewide organization that advocates for social justice for people with all types of disabilities. She is honored to be the current chair of the ACLU of Colorado board and also serves on the boards of the National Pain Advocacy Center, the Legal Services Corporation, and the Denver Foundation. Her favorite activity is causing good trouble, and of course, reading. She's been an avid reader for her entire life, and she's going to tell us tonight about a book called I'm Speaking Now. Black women share their truth in 101 true stories of love, courage, and hope, compiled by Amy Newmark and Breena Clarke. Julie, you're on.
Thank you. Good evening. And thank you, Denver Public Library, for organizing this fun event. All of us who've ever been shushed, dismissed, minimized, talked over by someone in power roared with appreciation when Kamala Harris said to Mike Pence during the 2020 vice presidential debates, I'm speaking now, because she was speaking for all of us. This book, I'm Speaking Now, Black women share their truth in 101 stories of love, courage, and hope, organized and edited by Amy Newmark and Breena Clarke, is a riveting collection of stories written by Black women living their best lives, not in spite of being Black women, but because they are Black women. Each section has a theme, such as history, family, everyday struggles. The section opens with a poem followed by a perfectly curated collection of stories. And every story starts with a quote by a famous, beloved Black woman, including Audre Lorde, Michelle Obama, Jada Pinkett Smith, and Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman, and many more. My copy, signed by one of the writers, my friend and long ago colleague and mentor, Regina Dighton, is cracked and worn because it's the kind of book you can and should read many times. You don't even have to go in order. Often at night, I treat myself to a story or 2 or 6 before bed. Some are love stories. Tanya May Advent writes about how she used the time washing and styling her daughter's hair to imbue them with self-love. And she says, I was determined to be the one who defined beauty in my household. Some of the stories lay bare excruciating pain, such as being ignored in a hospital room, being extremely ill with COVID, and not getting so much as a Tylenol, demonstrating clearly how racism is interwoven into every aspect of our lives. Dara Joyce Lurie writes, COVID and white supremacy are both stealthy and cruel diseases. She reflects, COVID-19 is new to me, but I've long been aware that I carry the disease of white supremacy in my body. In the section on loving Black men, Brandy Chantel writes, this is the scariest thing about loving a Black man, knowing that at any given moment, the world may take him from you. There are many stories of self-discovery, of women realizing that they're beautiful the way they are, of women claiming power by deciding to no longer spend their lives making white folks comfortable to their own detriment. Best of all, this book is filled with stories that outline the complexities that make us all human, such as the story by Crystal Newby, who starts by saying, I am a Black woman. I am a Black woman whose significant other is a police officer. I am a Black woman whose significant other is a white police officer. Plot twist. She describes her deep abiding love for her partner, her pride in him, and her fear each time she hears the Velcro of his bulletproof vest going on, knowing that he may not come home. And with equal passion and emotion, she describes the exhausting heartbreak each time another Black person is killed by the police. She ends by saying she breathes a sigh of relief when her partner comes home, and she also wants Black people to be able to breathe. One warning, do not read chapter 3 when you are hungry if you are like me, a horrible cook. The chapter is called Family and Food for the Soul, but several stories go into great detail describing actual food that sounds amazing and is very hard on a grumbling stomach. In all seriousness, though, this is a must-read book with something for everyone and a great opportunity to celebrate the wisdom, creativity, and beauty of a group of people that have given so much to this world, this country, and our community, Black women. They are speaking now, and this book gives any reader the gift of being able to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And you were right on time. Perfect. Thank you so much. That sounds like a wonderful book. I'm speaking now. Black women share their truth in 101 stories of love, courage, and hope. Next up, oops, there goes the timer. Next up, Rory Potikin, who is the Vicky and Kent Logan Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art at the Denver Art Museum. He was previously Achenbach Graphic Arts Council Fellow at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco and Curator at the San Jose, California Museum of Art, where he had worked in the curatorial department from 2011 to 2022. He has organized exhibitions and projects with artists Guillermo Galindo, Din Kulei, Wanju Lim, Richard Mizrak, Claire Roas, Tabaimo, Diana Thater, and Pei White. His publications include Din Kulei, True Journey is a Return, and Jean Connor, Collage. Potikin is currently organizing the reinstallation of the modern and contemporary art galleries at the Denver Art Museum, opening in May 2023. His book is the novel They're There by Tommy Orange. Rory, can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Great. Thanks so much, Jim, for that introduction. And I hope everyone comes to the Denver Art Museum in May to see the reinstallation of the modern and contemporary art galleries. And many thanks to my friends at the Denver Art Museum for organizing this fun event. As Jim mentioned, my book is They're There by Tommy Orange. It's, you know, all the critics say it's a remarkable debut for the first-time novelist. Margaret Atwood on the cover says an astonishing literary debut. So we can't argue with Margaret Atwood. It's really won all of the awards. The winner of the National Book Critics Circle John Leonard Prize. It was one of the New York Times 10 best books of the year, and most deservedly, it was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for 2019. The book is an honest and compelling story of urban Indigenous Americans. It's set in Oakland, California, and it follows a cast of 12 characters. It alternates between first, second, and third person. And you move through the book in a series of sort of vignettes. So you get a slice of each character's life. And they're all making their way to the big Oakland powwow in California. Some of the characters' histories and backstories, even futures, entwine. Characters like Tony Lohman, who's 21. He's of Cheyenne descent, born and raised in Oakland, but he suffers from fetal alcohol syndrome. There's Danny Oxidone, he's a young documentary filmmaker enrolled in the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes who collects stories from Native people in Oakland. A job that Tommy Orange actually did and was part of an inspiration for the novel. It's a fun fact. There's Opal, Viola, Victoria Bearshield, and Jackie Redfeather. They're sisters, and whom as children participated in the occupation of Alcatraz Island with their mother in 1970. And so forth. Many other characters, and they face numerous challenges such as depression, alcoholism, unemployment, and most importantly, what it means to be Indigenous today. The title of the book, They're There, comes from that often misconstrued quote by Gertrude Stein, who longed for her childhood home and the Oakland that she grew up in, that in her eyes, when she returned to the city, was no longer there. So in many ways for Tommy Orange, Stein's painful nostalgia for rural Oakland is akin to how many Indigenous people experience the urban environment, as in Orange's words, buried ancestral land, glass and concrete and wire and steel, unreturnable covered memory. There is no there, end quote. So what to make of this? Orange opens the book with a searing prologue, a kind of Indigenous manifesto in which the author lays bare the atrocities faced by Indigenous communities as colonialism expanded ever westward across Turtle Island. In They're There, Orange shows his readers what it means to be an urban native. The sounds of freeways more familiar than a babbling creek, a skyline more recognizable than a sacred mountain. the smell of gas and freshly wet concrete ever present than the burning of cedar sage. I picked up this book during the pandemic of 2020 and read it voraciously. The words just kind of tumble off of the page. It's a book that you won't put down. It's also a book full of contradiction, pain, and heartache, much like the pandemic. So as Orange writes, quote, being Indian has never been about returning to the land. The land is everywhere and nowhere. And I just have to say, wow, that's Tommy Orange's They're There.
Thank you very much, Rory. We're going to move on to our third contestant tonight, Asma Zahainat Khan. She holds a PhD in international human rights law with a specialization in military intervention and war crimes in the Balkans. Blackwater Falls, her new crime novel on racial justice and policing, was published in November 2022 to rave reviews from the New York Times and the Washington Post. Blackwater Falls is also an Apple Books and a Publishers Weekly Best Books of 2022 pick. Khan is the author of the award-winning Isa Katak and Rachel Getty crime fiction series, which begins with The Unquiet Dead, and the author of the critically acclaimed Khorasan Archives Fantasy Quartet, which begins with The Bloodprint. She is also a contributor to the anthologies Private Investigations, Sword, Stone, Table, and The Perfect Crime. A British-born Canadian and former adjunct law professor, she now lives in Colorado with her husband. And the book she'll be telling us about today is What Strange Paradise by Omar Akkad. All yours. I think you're on mute.
Okay, I'm up now. Thank you so much for that introduction, Jim. And thank you very much to the Denver Public Library for inviting me to participate today. I am so excited to pitch my book, which is called What Strange Paradise by Omar Akkad, whom I had the great pleasure of meeting at a literary event we did together. And Omar is a quiet and modest guy, but when he speaks, he really delivers a punch. And the book is exactly the same. He is a journalist who has reported from and lived all around the world, and including from war zones. And that kind of international sensibility is very much present in this beautiful novel, which is a gut punch, heart wound of a book about a child refugee from Syria whose name is Amir. Now, it's written in this absolutely stunning prose, and I think that Omar the author must actually bleed metaphors and similes the way the rest of us breathe air. And so I really envy the gorgeousness of his writing. But the story opens with the body of a boy that washes up on the beach of an unnamed island. And it makes us immediately think of the story of the young boy, Syrian refugee, who did wash up on a beach island, Kurdi. And in the story, the child is presumably dead, one of thousands who have died in the crossing, but his ghost arises and moves off to seek shelter in the countryside, where he runs into a young girl named Vanna, and she sees that he's immediately being hunted by the police. And even though Vanna and Amir can't communicate in the same language, and her mother is most likely the kind of person who would be the first to turn him in, the two children quickly become allies. And so the chase across the islands begins. Now, in this story, Amir and Vanna meet kindness and cruelty everywhere, from the police to fellow passengers on the crossing, to members of Amir's own family, to local islanders. And something that I found was a really complex and disturbing note is, as a reader, you ask yourself why the forces of law and order are determined to capture this young boy, or the ghost of this young boy. What threat could he possibly pose to them? Until we realize the chase is not because he's a threat to the police or to the island, but to Fortress Europe, to the West, to our configuring of how we understand us versus them, the civilized versus the uncivilized, the deserving versus the undeserving. And all of it is underlined by this fear that if we don't shore up our borders against a young invader like Amir, we might very well lose ourselves and our way of life. And of course, in this novel, what the author is really getting at is this deeper question of Are these the kind of people we want to be? The kind who criminalize a child fleeing war, or the giving of aid to the drowning, or let's say in our own country, criminalizing the act of providing water to asylum seekers at the southern border. So what I love about What Strange Paradise is that it forces us to grapple with these questions without ever losing sight of the individuality of the characters, Amir and Vanna, a young boy and a young girl. And the heart of this story is the communication between these two. I was transfixed, absolutely transfixed by how Vanna shields this boy and takes on his struggle for freedom as her own struggle. And there's this gorgeous communication between them, this thread of sympathy and mutual understanding, the toughness and resilience of children coupled with their unquestioning open-heartedness, and how Vanna knows, when so few adults do, instinctively, not only what is right, but what is just. Now, I found in the novels that I read that most refugee accounts in novels posit a kind of binary, East versus West. A refugee is trying to reach the promised land of Fortress Europe, which is barred legislatively in many other ways. But in Amir's story, what's so unique about what the author has to offer is that first, East meets East. So he's fleeing from Syria, and the first stop with his family is in Egypt. And it's eye-opening to see the different characters on the boat that is supposed to take the passengers to the promised land. There's
30 seconds.
There's the smugglers, the holy and devout, the hustlers and charlatans, the liars who feel no shame at profiting off human misery. And what I think this does for me as a reader is it unravels the complexity of the crisis with all these little human moments of whether food will be shared or life jackets will be. The final point I want to argue is that the ending will stun you. It's so unexpected, so brilliant, and it will leave you hollow and suffering and amazed, pent up with energy, which is almost impossible for an author to achieve.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. These books all sound so great. What Strange Paradise. Okay, our last contestant, not least by any means, Connor McCormick Cavanaugh, who's a staff writer at Westword, where he covers a range of beats, including local politics, immigration, and homelessness. He previously worked as a journalist in Tunisia and loves to talk New York sports. He enjoys reading nonfiction books about history and politics, and he has two cats named Sam and Spider, who unfortunately could not be with us tonight. His book, Garden of the Beast by Erik Larson, we're about to find out what it is. Connor, take it away. Tell us about Erik Larson's book.
Yeah, thank you. No cats, but we have the bird over here, so that's the replacement. Yeah, thank you to the Denver Public Library for putting this on, and thanks to Jim and to Margot for this event. Libraries hold a dear place in my heart. I actually, before I got into journalism in Tunisia, I worked as a librarian there, and being surrounded by books and getting to recommend book ideas to patrons was just incredible for me. Like many of you, my favorite nonfiction books are the ones that hook me in from the start and keep me coming back day after day and night after night until I finish the book, and then send me on the internet to do research on the characters in the book late into the evening. In the Garden of Beasts by Erik Larson is that type of book, and should be added to 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die, which I actually got as a gift from my dad a few years back. In the Garden of Beasts tells a story of William Dodd's tenure as US ambassador in Berlin in the mid-1930s, a time when the Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler, is consolidating power and ramping up a reign of terror, all while telling American and European leaders that the Third Reich has nothing but peaceful intentions. Dodd, a Southerner and lifelong academic, had thought he would have enough time to write the quintessential historical series on the American South during his tenure in Berlin. But the demands of the job changed those plans. As is the Erik Larson specialty, the book reads more like historical fiction or even regular fiction, in large part due to Larson's extraordinary ability to use letters, transcripts, and newspaper clippings of a time period to transport the reader directly into the room. Case in point is Dodd's meeting with Hitler. When the reader gets to be a fly on the wall as Dodd witnesses Hitler's temperamentalism and manipulation, that Larson method significantly increases in the Garden of Beasts accessibility to people outside of World War II history buffs and German history experts, of which I am neither. And what makes the book even more compelling is that as attacks on Jews are ramping up, the German military industrial machine is steaming ahead, and political dissent is crushed, the reader gets to witness an odd parallel universe in which Dodd, not one for lavish parties or spending outside of his ambassador salary, must still attend gaudy galas and fancy balls with Nazi officials and the who's who of Berlin. And that's a constant theme that the book returns to. Life goes on for those who benefit from the system, while falling into a nightmare for those that are targeted and persecuted. The book is especially important nowadays because of the rising current of fascism across the globe. There are, of course, authoritarian regimes around the world that never even had an element of democratic governance, like North Korea and Syria. But many of the fascist political examples that we're witnessing, such as the authoritarian regime in Hungary, the democratic backsliding in Tunisia, which was the birthplace of the Arab Spring, and the attempts to overturn democratic outcomes in the United States and Brazil, have taken place in democracies. In the Garden of Beasts reminds readers that Hitler rose to power in a democracy, and then the slippery slope began because too many people in power, including the United States diplomatic machine, attempted to explain away his views and plans. We see that Dodd made his best efforts to warn the American government, but it was too little, too late, and the worst that could have happened took place. As the book shows, that can happen anywhere. Thanks.
Connor, thank you very much. And thanks to all our contestants. Can I ask for a huge virtual round of applause for all 5 of our contestants tonight? There we go. Come all up on screen. Thank you all. Before we vote, we're going to vote now for a minute. You can look for a poll, which will appear down at the bottom of the screen, the bottom of your Zoom screen. And you can see there, it'll ask you to cast your vote. And you will, the panelists, you can't vote, I'm sorry to say. But all of you who can vote should vote now. And while you're voting, we're going to give you 2 minutes to vote. I'd like to ask Michelle to come back on screen to tell us some headlines about what's been going on at the library recently.
Thanks a lot for asking, Jim. Although I'm not happy that I can't vote, although it would be very hard to vote. That was really, really fun. And those are all going to be on my reading list now. So I guess I have 3 things I'd love to share tonight. One is that we are so grateful to Denver voters for passing Measure 2I to support the library this past November. You will be hearing us talk about the resources and the services and programs that are made possible by Strong Library, Strong Denver, supported by our special revenue fund called the Denver Public Library Fund, which is super exciting. This was an effort that was years in the making and is a big win for the library system and our community. And it's going to allow us to more fully meet the evolving needs of our community. We are really looking forward to sharing our progress with you as we take a phased approach this year to implementing this funding. It's going to take a little bit of time to ramp things up, so we hope that you're patient. But we will be keeping you posted. So some things that you can see over the next year, we will be enhancing, expanding, and diversifying the collection of books, media, and other popular items to reduce wait times, which I think will be popular with our audience tonight. I can obviously tell we have a lot of dedicated book lovers with us tonight. We'll also be using that funding to ensure more appropriate linguistic and cultural representation, which is very important to us. We will be expanding our hours at our branch library locations, so stay tuned for that. And we will be upgrading facilities. So we'll be doing a lot of deferred maintenance, and we'll also be making some modernization and cosmetic upgrades. So that's really exciting. As I mentioned earlier, we are in the middle of Winter of Reading Time, and that is our annual library challenge for adults. It's designed to connect you with our incredible library collections, services, and events. And all you need to do is to pick up or download a brochure, complete 5 activities in the brochure, and they're fun activities and they're not that hard, and then trade in that brochure for a limited edition carabiner mug. It's very cool. I've already gotten mine, and I don't get to go to the front of the class. I did my 5 activities, or a really cool canvas tote bag. Really, really nice. So head on over to our website, denverlibrary.org/winterreading, or go to your local library. You have until February 28th to get your activity brochure and participate in the winter fun. And then the last thing I want to mention is that February is right around the corner. It is next week, which is shocking, but it's true. And we will be celebrating, as we do every year, Black History Month throughout the month, with events celebrating leaders, artists, and other creatives in the Black community, past, present, and future. Every year we kick off Black History Month with the annual Juanita Gray Community Service Awards. It's in person again this year, which I'm really excited about. And it will take place on Saturday, February 4th at 1:30 p.m. at our Ford Warren Branch Library in the Whittier neighborhood. Please check out our website at denverlibrary.org for more information on the many programs and events we're hosting throughout February. I also think you should keep your eye out for a very special limited edition Black History Month library card, which I got a sneak preview of. It has a beautiful graphic design by a talented local Black artist. And with that, Jim, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. It's so exciting to hear all the things going on. I wish we were in Denver to partake of some of the events that you describe in the programs, and also to pick up some of the swag, which I know, because you were kind enough to send me some last year, is quite nice. So as part of the Winter of Reading, we have our results. And for runner-up, it's a tie between Rory Potikin and Connor McCormick Kavanaugh for There and In the Garden of Beasts. So I guess this is the first time this has happened, but next year you can both come back and with a different book if you want to participate. Thank you so much. And the winner is Julie Riskin for I'm Speaking Now. Julie, thank you for that wonderful presentation. Why don't we get Julie up on the screen? You obviously struck a resonant chord with the community of readers here. It was a close vote all around. There will be no recounts in this election, however. You are the undisputed winner, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much.
All right. So to the audience, let me say a couple of things. If you have a book you think everyone should read before you die, you can go to our website, www.1000books.com, and search for it. If it's already there, you can read a comment. If it's not there, just click on Add a Book and let us know why you think it belongs on the list, and it will be on the list. On the site, you can also subscribe to my newsletter. I think there'll be a link to that in the chat. And finally, as I like to do at the end of all these events, just to read a couple of sentences from the conclusion to the introduction to my book, because I think it speaks about what this event is about and what libraries are about. A faith in reading's power and the learning and imagination it nourishes is something I've been lucky enough to take for granted as both fact and freedom. It's something I fear may be forgotten in the great amnesia of our in-the-moment news feeds and algorithmically defined identities, which hide from our view the complexity of feelings and ideas that books demand we determinedly engage. To get lost in a book, be it story or study, is inherently to acknowledge the voice of another, to broaden one's perspective beyond the confines of one's own understanding. A good book is the opposite of a selfie. The right book at the right time can expand our lives in the way love does, making us more thoughtful, more generous, more brave, more alert to the world's wonders, and more pain by its inequities, more wise, more kind. Thanks to the Denver Public Library for the use of the hall tonight. Special thank you to our 5 participants. And thank you all for tuning in. I'll turn it back to Michelle to say goodnight.
Thank you, Jim. That was really beautiful. Thank you to Jim and our panelists for making this such a wonderful event. I'm blown away by everyone's battle, and I'm walking away with several books I have not read. I think everybody is feeling that way tonight. Again, thanks to the bookies and to the Denver Public Library Friends Foundation for your support. Have a great evening, have a great weekend, and keep on reading. Bye-bye.